In this video, we'll be scientifically testing one of the most advanced but also most expensive sleep devices on the market, the 8Sleep Pod 3 mattress and cover. Now, as someone who's personally struggled keeping the right temperature during my sleep for years, the 8Sleep Pod 3 is the device that has positively affected my sleep quality the most. The Pod 3 actively heats and cools your mattress throughout the different phases of your night, aiming to create a better sleep environment, and it also has a bunch of sensors that track important metrics like your sleep stages, heart rate, and heart rate variability without having to wear anything at all in your body. But it does come with a hefty price tag of at least $2,000 and probably even more. Is that worth it? Well, in this video we're going to find out. We're going to focus on testing the accuracy of the 8Sleep Pod 3 sleep tracking capabilities. We'll be comparing its measurements to different reference devices. In this case, an EEG device that measures brainwaves and an ECG device that measures the electrical signals of the heart. By doing so, we'll get a better understanding of just how accurate and reliable the sleep tracking technology in the 8Sleep Pod 3 really is. I will also share some of my more subjective experiences with the heating and cooling functionality of the 8Sleep Pod 3 to give you a complete picture of how the 8Sleep Pod 3 performed. So whether you're just curious about the 8Sleep Pod 3 or you're looking for a way to improve your sleep, this video is for you. Let's get started. Hello everyone. For those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Rob and I'm a postdoctoral scientist specializing in biological data analysis. Now, before we get started with an in-depth analysis of the Pod 3, a few disclosures. This video is not sponsored and 8Sleep did not have any input in this video, nor did I get to see it before it came out. However, 8Sleep did send me the Pod 3 cover to test, and since the Pod 3 performed well in my testing, I asked 8Sleep if they could provide a discount code for all of you, and I added both an affiliate and non-affiliate link below, which gets you the same discount either way. Now, with that out of the way, let's get started with testing the 8Sleep Pod 3. Now, for those of you that haven't heard of 8Sleep yet, let me briefly introduce what it is, what it aims to do, and how it works. The idea behind the 8Sleep Pod 3 is that by manipulating the temperature of your sleeping environment, you can improve your sleep. Basically, your core body temperature plays a very important role in helping you fall asleep and also in keeping you asleep throughout the night. And 8Sleep wants to help you optimize this. Let me show you what that looks like. And this is what my core body temperature looks like during a typical night of good sleep. I actually track my core body temperature using a smart pill that you can swallow and that continuously measures your core body temperature. And as I said, a typical night, at least one with good sleep, would look something like this. Along the horizontal axis, we have the time of the night, and on the vertical axis is the temperature, with on the left degrees Celsius and on the right degrees Fahrenheit. And as you can see, my core body temperature starts out high and then quickly drops as I get into deep sleep. Then as the night progresses, it slowly rises again. Now, this rise in temperature is actually one of the wake-up signals that the body uses in the morning. Now, we see something similar for this second night where I track my core body temperature with this same smart pill. Again, my temperature starts out high and then quickly drops. And then for the second part of the night, it slowly rises again. And if all goes well, this temperature pattern should help me wake up naturally and feeling refreshed. However, the flip side is that if your core temperature doesn't drop or doesn't drop enough early in the night, you have trouble falling and staying asleep. And also, if your temperature rises during the wrong moments, it could mean that you wake up earlier than you might have wanted. Now, the 8Sleep Pod 3 aims to help you keep your sleep environment at the correct temperature so that you can sleep better throughout the night. It does this by pumping cold or warm water through the cover, which actively heats or cools the mattress. Now, I'll share more of my subjective experiences and the things I liked, but also the things I didn't like about the temperature regulation of the 8Sleep Pod 3 later in this video. However, first I want to go into more objective testing of the Pod 3. And this is very important because in order to control the temperature of the bed most effectively throughout the night, the Pod 3 needs to be able to accurately track your sleep. Because if it knows what sleep stage you're in, it can tailor the temperature better to that part of the night. And as we saw before, your core body temperature should be lower early in the night when you have more deep sleep, and you probably want a higher temperature closer to waking up. Now, the 8Sleep app also reports the sleep stages in the morning, which helps you get an impression of your sleep quality. However, is the Pod 3 actually any good at sleep stage tracking? Let's find out. To check if the Pod 3 can detect my sleep stages, I'll compare it to an EEG device called the Dream 2 that can actually measure my brain waves and has been shown to be relatively reliable at sleep stage tracking. And here I show an overview of the sleep test results. Now, for getting an overall impression of how well the 8Sleep Pod 3 performs, the Dream 2 should likely be good enough. However, the gold standard reference device would be polysomnography, which we would also like to try on the Pod 3 in the future. Now, on top here are the sleep stages as recorded by the EEG device, and on the left are the sleep stages as recorded by the Pod 3. And I tested the Pod 3 against the EEG device for a total of 44 nights, and we will see how close the predictions of the Pod 3 are to those of the EEG device. And each column here sums to 100%, meaning that we can see what percentage of each of the sleep stages according to the Dream 2 was predicted as a sleep stage by the 8 sleep pod 3. And if they perfectly agree, all values on the diagonal should be 100%. First of all, we see that about 91% of what was deep sleep according to the EEG device was also detected as deep sleep by the pod 3, which is actually really good. If the deep sleep according to the EEG device was predicted differently by the pod 3, it was predicted as being light sleep at about 9%. Still, we see that almost all of the deep sleep that the EEG device detected was also detected as deep sleep by the pod 3. However, the pod 3 did tend to detect a bit more deep sleep. And we can see that even better if we look at the individual nights. Now on top here we have the sleep stages according to the Dream 2 EEG headband with the clock time along the horizontal axis and the sleep stages on the vertical axis. On the bottom we have a similar plot but now for the 8 sleep pod 3. And I've highlighted all the EEG recorded deep sleep in purple here. And as you can see there's quite a good agreement between the pod 3 and the EEG headband in terms of deep sleep. Basically all of the deep sleep detected by the EEG headband was also detected by the pod 3, but the pod 3 did detect some extra deep sleep right here but also clearly right here in this extra segment. And we see something similar for this night right here. There's generally a pretty good agreement between the pod 3 and the EEG headband, but the pod 3 does tend to detect some extra deep sleep. You can see that right here, but also right here and right here, for instance. And this is basically what most nights look like. Almost all of the deep sleep that is detected by the EEG headband is also detected by the pod 3, but it just detects some extra deep sleep as well. It is true that every once in a while some smaller deep sleep segments that the EEG device detected are not detected by the pod 3, as you can see right here, but overall the agreement is really good honestly, and the pod 3 is amongst the best performing devices when it comes to deep sleep agreement. Light sleep agreement is also very good at 78%. This is again amongst the higher numbers we've seen for any of the devices so far. And if the pod 3 did disagree with the EEG device on light sleep, it mostly predicted it as a deep sleep. Now this is actually the extra deep sleep detected by the pod 3 that we were just looking at, and as you can see this is mostly what the EEG device detected as being light sleep. And the REM sleep agreement was also not bad at all, with an overall agreement of 68%. And if the 8 sleep pod 3 did disagree on REM sleep with the EEG device, it mostly predicted it as being deep sleep instead. And we can see that clearly based on the individual nights as well. Now this is a similar plot to before, but now with the REM sleep as measured by the EEG device marked in red. And as you can see for this night, there's a really good agreement between the EEG device and the pod 3. In fact, all the REM sleep segments that were detected by the EEG device are also detected by the pod 3. And this second example night also looks really good, with only the first REM sleep segment detected by the EEG device being missed by the pod 3, but all the other segments agree very well. And most other nights actually have quite a good agreement, similar to what you can see for this night. Now you go through roughly 4 to 6 sleep cycles each night, each one starting with light sleep and deep sleep, marked here in blue, and each one ending in REM sleep, marked here in red. And as you can see, I likely had 1, 2, 3, 4 complete sleep cycles this night, and we are able to see them based on just the data from the pod 3, which is quite impressive honestly. I did not expect it to perform this well when I received the device. Awake detection is also pretty decent, with almost 72% of the awake moments detected by the EEG device also detected by the pod 3, so this looks pretty good. And if awake time was detected differently, it was mostly detected as being light sleep at about 20%. Now this makes sense of course, since light sleep is the closest sleep stage to being awake. Now in general, the pod 3 does tend to detect the long awake moments that the Dream 2 also detects, but it does tend to sometimes disagree on some of the shorter awake moments. Now you can see that right here, for instance, where I marked the awake moments detected by the EEG device in green. You can see that the 2 longer awake moments close to the end of the night match pretty well with the EEG device, but earlier in the night there are some short moments of wakefulness that don't agree between both of these devices. And that is generally the pattern I observed. The longer awake moments tend to agree very well with the EEG device, as you can see in the middle of the night right here, for instance. However, these shorter awake moments early in the night do not always agree. And you can also see that for this last example night I wanted to share with you, where the longer awake moments match very well, but some of these shorter awake moments do not match with the EEG device. So this is actually looking very good, especially for a device that you don't need to wear on your body, but it is integrated into your mattress instead. This means that you don't need to charge it, or you have to remember to wear it. The downside is of course that it only works if you sleep in your own bed, so you won't be tracked if you're traveling. But to put these results into context, we can compare the performance of the 8 sleep pod 3 to that of 44 other devices I've tested previously. However, first a quick side note. If you're interested in the latest updates on the wearables I'm testing, I'm planning to start back up with my newsletter and posting more off-the-cuff things on my Instagram and my YouTube Shorts channel. So if you're interested in any of those are linked below. Of course, you would also make me really happy and it would help my efforts if you subscribe to this YouTube channel and potentially like this video. But of course, this is totally up to you. Now, enough self-promotion. Let's compare the performance of the Pod 3 to 44 other devices. This graph shows you an overview of the agreement of different watches with the EEG device. Along the horizontal axis, we have the average agreement over the 4 individual sleep stages, and on the vertical axis, we have the agreement of the worst sleep stage. Now, the better the agreement, the more to the top right the device is. And as you can see, the best devices so far include different Apple Watches, in this case the Apple Watch Series 7, Series 8, Apple Watch SE and Apple Watch Ultra. But other really good performing watches include different Fitbits, Google devices, the Withings Sleep Analyzer and Whoop straps. And we also saw in my recent video that the updated Oura Ring 3 sleep stage algorithm is pretty good as well. And if we now plot the 8 Sleep Pod 3 in the same plot, which is marked here in red, we see it's almost as good as the Apple Watches in terms of overall agreement, and it's just as good if not better than the Fitbits, Whoop straps and the Oura Ring. It's especially consistent when it comes to its performance over all of the sleep stages, where for the sleep stage where it shows the worst performance, which is plotted on the vertical axis, the agreement is still around 68%, which is really good. Some devices actually sacrifice the performance of one sleep stage to be better at the others, but this is not the case for the Pod 3. So the sleep stage tracking of the 8 Sleep Pod 3 seems to be really good, and based on these results, I would say it's one of the top performers. However, what about other metrics? Your resting heart rate and heart rate variability during the night are important metrics for tracking your day-to-day sleep quality and for keeping an eye on your overall trends in fitness. But can something that's not directly connected to you, like a mattress cover, actually track something as complicated as your heart rate and heart rate variability? Well, let's find out. I'll do 2 tests of the heart rate and heart rate variability. First, I'll compare the measurements of the 8 Sleep Pod 3 to the Oura Ring 3, which we previously saw was pretty accurate. Now, the benefit of this kind of comparison is that we'll have many nights of data to work with, but the downside is that the Oura Ring 3 is of course not a gold standard reference device. So as a second check, I'll compare the Pod 3 against an ECG chest strap for a total of 2 nights. Now, an ECG chest strap is about as accurate as you can get for heart rate tracking. However, let's start with the comparison to the Oura Ring 3. And here we see that comparison with along the horizontal axis the measurements taken by the Oura Ring 3 and on the vertical axis the measurements taken by the 8 Sleep Pod 3. Now each dot here is a single heart rate measurement taken every 5 minutes, and the closer the points are to this blue line, the better the agreement. The darker black the colors, the more dots that there are, and as you can see there are quite a few points close to the blue line, meaning that most measurements agree between the Oura Ring 3 and the Pod 3. There is some variation, you see some points below the line right here, but overall there's a very good agreement. The correlation is also pretty high at 0.92, so this is looking pretty good. However, let's have a look at some individual nights to see what this actually looked like. And here you can see the first example night. Along the horizontal axis we have the time and my heart rate is along the vertical axis. In blue-green, I plotted my heart rate according to the Oura Ring, and in red is my heart rate according to the 8 Sleep Pod 3. And as you can see, the 2 lines show very similar patterns and they overlap quite okay most of the time, so that's good. And we generally see the same thing for this second example night right here. The patterns between both devices are very similar. You can also see that we're looking at a very narrow heart rate range, with the heart rate being between 45 and 55 beats per minute. And even within that narrow range, the agreement is very good. And this is basically what I see for all of the nights that I tested it, so also for this example night right here. So overall, this is a first indication that the Pod 3 might be quite decent at tracking your heart rate during the night. However, let's now compare it to an ECG chest strap, which actually measures the electrical signals of the heart. I'll compare the Pod 3 against the Polar H10 ECG chest strap, which can generally record my heart rate very accurately. Now for this comparison, I only have data for 2 nights, so there are fewer dots here, but as you can see, the correlation is similar to what we saw before. In this plot, we have the heart rate based on the Polar H10 on the horizontal axis and my heart rate according to the Pod 3 on the vertical axis. Now, similar to what we saw before, most points are along the blue line, meaning that there's an overall good agreement. And also the correlation, this R value up here, is similar to what we saw before and it's now 0.89. Which we can also see if we look at the 2 individual nights, of which this is the first night. Now, as you can see, the agreement is actually really good. Patterns are very similar, and only right here in blue-green, we see that the Polar H10 ECG chest strap had a peak in heart rate that the 8 Sleep Pod 3 did not detect. But this is likely a moment where I had to leave the bed for a bit to use the toilet, which actually means that the Pod 3 wouldn't even have been able to detect this brief increase in heart rate. And we basically see the same thing for this second night right here. Again, there's an overall good agreement with the ECG chest strap, trap, which is plotted here in blue-green, with just 2 peaks in my heart rate being missed. So we see that there's one clear peak here and one clear peak here picked up by the ECG chest strap that wasn't detected by the pod 3. Now for this moment right here and at the end of the night, I'm sure I left the bed to use the restroom, but I'm not sure about this moment right here. For this second peak right here, I'm not sure if I actually left the bed or if the pod 3 should have been able to pick up on this. But still, overall, the agreement is really good for something that's not directly attached to my body. I'm quite surprised at how accurate it is. Next, let's take a look at a more difficult metric for a device to track, heart rate variability, or HRV in short. HRV is basically the change in time between heartbeats, and though it might seem counterintuitive, you actually don't want a super consistent heartbeat pattern. Now say for instance you have 60 beats in a minute, this could mean that the time difference between each beat is exactly 1 second, but this is actually not what we want. We would rather see that from one beat to the next the difference is 1.2 seconds, then to the next one is 0.9 seconds, then 1.1 seconds, etc. to have a total of 60 beats in that minute. Now, the more relaxed and fit you are, the larger is this variation generally, meaning you have a higher HRV value. However, measuring HRV is much more difficult than measuring heart rate, since you don't just need to count the number of heartbeats, but you need to know exactly where they are. So let's see if the pod 3 was able to measure this. We'll again first compare it to the Oura ring for many nights of data, since I previously showed that the Oura ring was pretty good at measuring your HRV. And after that, we'll compare the pod 3 to an ECG chest strap for 2 nights. And here you can see an overview of that comparison. Along the horizontal axis, we have the heart rate variability as tracked by the Oura ring, and on the vertical axis, the heart rate variability as tracked by the H-Sleep pod 3. And as you can see, though there is a significant correlation, the correlation is much lower now at 0.48, meaning there's much less of an agreement between both of these devices. So either one or even both of the devices are likely performing less well here when it comes to measuring your heart rate variability. Now, H-Sleep also indicates on their website that there might be some variation between devices when it comes to HRV, though I'm not sure if this is what they meant by that. If we look at the individual nights, we can also see that there's a much larger difference between the Oura ring in blue-green and the H-Sleep pod 3 in red, at least compared to what we saw for the heart rate measurements. The trends that they show in HRV are the same, but the actual values are a bit different. And that's also what we see for this second example night right here, where there's a general agreement in the patterns, but not the exact values and the resolution of the pod 3 compared to the Oura ring. And to close off, that's also what we see for this final example night I wanted to share with you. The overall patterns in HRV are again very similar between both devices, but they're definitely not the same. However, let's now compare the performance of the pod 3 to an ECG chest strap, which should give us an even better impression of its performance. And that overview is displayed right here. Along the horizontal axis is the HRV as recorded by the Polar H10 chest strap, and on the vertical axis are the measurements of the H-Sleep pod 3. And as you can see, there is a clear correlation, though again this is lower than the correlation we had for heart rate. Now in this case, the correlation is 0.67, as you can see up here, so there's definitely a significant deviation between the pod 3 and the ECG chest strap, but it also doesn't look terrible. Now, just for your reference, the maximum correlation you can have is 1, so this correlation is not that bad at all. And we can also see that based on the individual nights. Now in blue-green here is my HRV as calculated based on the measurements with the ECG chest strap, and in red are the results of the pod 3. Now I tried to calculate the HRV in the exact same way and in the exact same 15-minute intervals that the H-Sleep pod 3 also reported them for. And as you can see, indeed, the general patterns between both devices agree. We see the values going up and down at the same time, but the precise values differ between the two. So this is somewhat similar to what we saw when we were comparing the pod 3 to the Oura ring, though the agreement is actually even a bit better now. And we see the same thing for this second example night right here. Again, the patterns are very similar, but they differ in the details. So that means that in terms of heart rate tracking, the pod 3 is pretty accurate, but in terms of the exact HRV, it's not quite as good. However, in the end, the most important thing about HRV is to get a rough impression of your values and the variation between the nights, and I suspect based on these results, the pod 3 should be good enough to track these kinds of patterns and trends. So based on these tests, I'm actually really impressed with the H-Sleep pod 3. When I originally received the device, I was a bit skeptical that it would be any good at the actual sleep tracking. I was worried that the focus had been fully on the cooling and heating functionalities and that the sleep tracking had just been an afterthought. Luckily, this didn't turn out to be the case, and I'm quite impressed with the performance of the sleep stage and sleep metric tracking of the pod 3. But what about the temperature regulation? Was it any good? Well, this is more subjective, of course, but in my experience it worked quite well, though I did have some small issues with it. Fit. Now, personally, my issue is that I struggle to stay cool during the night, which is less of a problem in winter when I can open a window, but it is a problem in summer or when I don't sleep alone in the bed. Now, one of my ex-girlfriends once complained that it felt like the bedroom had to be freezing in order for me to sleep comfortably, and I have to admit, when in the morning we checked the temperature sensor in my bedroom, it turned out that during the night, at its lowest, the bedroom temperature was indeed just 6 degrees above freezing. So for me, the 8 Sleep Pod 3 has really been a solution for those hot summer nights and for those days where I share the bed. And the good thing is that the temperature on each side of the bed can be adjusted separately. So overall, my experience has been very positive. Now, the only thing I struggled with quite a few times is getting the temperature settings right when the outside temperature abruptly changed. Now, I generally sleep with the window open, meaning the bedroom temperature varies quite a bit during the seasons. And if it's colder outside, the Pod 3 does not need to cool me as much, since the bedroom temperature will also be lower. Now, there is an autopilot feature that should automatically adjust for this, but in my experience, it doesn't deal well with abrupt changes in temperature. And in those cases, I've woken up feeling really cold and I needed to manually adjust the settings. However, this is really the only thing I can complain about when it comes to the 8 Sleep Pod 3 and its temperature regulation. Well, I actually would have one more complaint, and that's the price. The Pod 3 is not cheap, coming in at least $2,000. Still, knowing what I know now, I would buy the Pod 3 since it significantly improved my subjective sleep quality and it's a good sleep tracker. However, before testing it myself and validating that it works on me, it would have been an expensive gamble. Now, my experience has been very positive and my test shows it performs well, but it's up to you if you want to spend this kind of money. Now, before getting to my final conclusions and recommendations, I do want to mention some of the limitations of my testing. First of all, I just tested the 8 Sleep Pod 3 on myself, and I'm not sure if all these results will be the same for you. I spent much of my night sleeping on my back, and if you sleep on your stomach, the results might differ. Second, the EEG device I use as a reference is not perfect. I believe it's good enough for these purposes, but ideally would use polysomnography to test it again in the future. Finally, I use the Pod 3 cover with Perfect Fit. This basically means that instead of getting a whole new mattress, I received a cover to put over my existing mattress. I expect results will not be worse if you order the Pod 3 mattress, which has the mattress included, but I wasn't able to test this. So what are my final conclusions of the 8 Sleep Pod 3? Well, overall, it really surprised me in terms of sleep tracking quality. Like I said, I didn't have high expectations, but those low expectations luckily weren't warranted. So if you struggle with maintaining a good temperature in your sleeping environment and you want to track your sleep quite accurately, the 8 Sleep Pod 3 is definitely a device I would recommend. Now, in the description below, I'll include 2 different discount links. One is affiliate, which supports the channel, and the other gives you the same discount without supporting the channel. I want to give you the option either way. And you will need that discount since the 8 Sleep Pod 3 is not cheap. Now, if you can't afford this, there are alternative ways of modulating your core body temperature before bed, for example, by taking a hot shower right before bed. I'd recommend listening to the Huberman podcast to learn more about this, for instance, the episode with Matthew Walker. By the way, if you want to track your general health and sleep, but you don't want something as elaborate as the Pod 3, the Oura Ring and the Whoop strap are also great alternatives, and videos on these 2 devices are linked right here. If, on the other hand, you want to know what is the best device depending on your budget, check out these videos right here. Thank you so much for watching and catch you in the next video.